applicable. The Supreme Lord does not put his semen into that which is not spiritual, but it is stated here that the Supreme Person puts his semen into material nature. This means that the living entities are spiritual by nature. After impregnation, material nature delivers all kinds of living entities, beginning from the greatest living creature, Lord Brahma, down to the insignificant ant, in all varieties of forms. In Bhagavad Gita 14.4, material nature is clearly mentioned as Sarva Yonisu. This means that of all varieties of species, demigods, human beings, animals, birds, and beasts, whatever is manifested, material nature is the mother. And the Supreme Person of Godhead is the seed-giving Father. Generally, in its experience, that the father gives life to the child, but the mother gives it body. Although the seed of life is given by the father, the body develops within the womb of the mother. Similarly, the spiritual living entities are impregnated into the womb of material nature, but the body, being supplied by material nature, takes on many different species and forms of life. The theory that the symptoms of life are manifested by the interaction of the 24 material elements is not supported here. The living force comes directly from the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is completely spiritual. Therefore, no material scientific advancement can produce life. The living force comes from the spiritual world and has nothing to do with the interaction of material elements. Well, that just busted the speculation of all the mundane philosophers and scientists. And so we have to take a lot of it, pay a lot of attention to this verse because it is clearly debunking all the nonsense theories of the scientists and philosophers, mundane scientists and philosophers. Okay, so it says, after the Supreme Personality Godhead impregnates material nature with his internal potency, material nature delivers the sum total of the cosmic intelligence, which is known as Hiranmaya. This takes place in material nature when she is agitated by the destinations of the conditioned souls. Well, this is a very interesting verse because when it says material nature delivers the sum total of the cosmic intelligence, which is known as Hiranmaya. Obviously, there has to be some cosmic intelligence because so many things are happening that we cannot explain ourselves. And obviously, human beings are not the authors of those things. So there are things happening in nature all the time that are bewildering to living entities. And we just saw it recently, last couple of days, where trees are falling down and all kinds of wires are being torn down also. And so many things like electricity and so forth are not working properly and so forth. So there is definitely superior power in the universe, and all we can do is simply see it happen. We can't stop it, we can try and rehabilitate things or fix things, but ultimately the power of nature cannot be controlled by the human beings. Why? Because it's supernatural powers, and ultimately it's the will of God. So if we don't see things like that, then we remain confused about how material nature is acting. Okay, so here let's read a little bit more about this purport. First of all, the verse today is saying, after the Supreme Personality of Godhead impregnates material nature with his internal potency, material nature delivers the sum total of the cosmic intelligence, which is known as Hiranmaya. This takes place in material nature when she is agitated by the destinations of the conditioned souls. Well, all conditioned souls have karma. Therefore, they talk about this talks about the uh, agitation by the destinations of the conditioned souls. Yeah, every conditioned soul has destination based on its karma, and that causes interactions to take place, and then nature is agitated by these destinations of the conditioned souls. Purport: this impregnation of material nature is described in Bhagavad Gita, 14th chapter, verse number 3. Well, I have it right in front of me to see what it says. Mama yonir mahad brahma tasmin garbam dadamyaham sambhava sarvabhutanam tato bhavati bharat. The total material substance called Brahman is the source of birth. And it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the birth of all living beings, O son of Bharata. So the key word here is I pregnate. So that means that in material nature, uh, Krishna impregnates it with living entities. So that right there debunks the whole theory that at a certain stage of material nature, combinations and of different elements, the living entity is produced. That theory is debunked here. The material nature cannot produce a living entity. That living entity is impregnated into the material nature by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there are different theories about how living entities come into existence. Now we're hearing the real, you know, the real explanation of it. And that's what it says here in the purport. It says this impregnation of material nature is described in Bhagavad Gita, 14th chapter, verse number 3. Okay, so it says, the total material substance called Brahman is the source of birth. And it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the births of all living beings, O son of Brahman, O son of Bharata. Well, that means that we don't see things in there from, let's say the origin of things, because it's happening in a mysterious way. So in the purport of the 14.3, it says, this is an explanation of the world. Everything that takes place is due to the combination of Chetra and Chetragya, the body and the spirit soul. This combination of material nature and the living entity is made possible by the Supreme God Himself. Okay, so this debunks the Darwinism and so forth. Has nothing to do with the slow, gradual development of matter into living beings. Therefore, it says this combination of material nature and living entity is made possible by the Supreme God Himself. So that is a very significant statement. How does material nature seem to uh, exhibit or produce living entities? Well, it's not by any combination of matter. It's by the impregnation of matter by the jivas or living entities. And it's a mysterious thing that we don't see and we don't know how it happens. This combination of material nature and a living entity is made possible by the Supreme God Himself. Well, this, of course, scientists would reject that because they hate God and they don't want to admit that there is somebody called the Supreme Personality of Godhead who is injecting living the material nature with living entities. That's something that they never accept. The Mahatsattva is a total cause of the total cosmic manifestation. And that total substance of material cause, in which there are three modes of nature, is sometimes called Brahman. The Supreme Personality impregnates that total substance, and thus innumerable universes become possible. This total material substance, the Mahatsattva, described Brahman in the Vedic literature. Mundaka Upanishad 1.1.9. Tasmat itad Brahma nama anam jayate. The Supreme Person impregnates that Brahman with seeds of the living entity. The 24 elements, beginning from earth, water, fire, air, are all material energy, and they constitute what is called Mahad Brahma, or the great Brahman, the material nature. As explained in the seventh chapter, beyond this, there is another superior nature, living entity. Into material nature, superior nature is mixed by the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And thereafter, all living entities are born of this material nature. Well, that just debunked Darwinism right there. It has nothing to do with at certain point of material nature, living entities are produced by, let's say, combinations, and eventually matter turns into a living being. That is basically what Darwinism is saying, and it's debunked right here. The scorpion lays its eggs in piles of rice. Sometimes it is said that the scorpion is born out of rice, but the rice is not the cause of the scorpion. Actually, the eggs were laid by the mother. Similarly, material nature is not the cause of the birth of living entities. Okay, see, that's the statement right there. The seed is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they only seem to come out as products of material nature. Thus, every living entity, according to his past activities, has a different body created by this material nature, so that the entity can enjoy or suffer according to his past deeds, meaning karma. The Lord is the cause of all the manifestations of the living entities in this material. So we all come from Krishna. So that means we're all related. Krishna is the Supreme Father, and we are all the praja of the Supreme Lord. But we have different destinies due to karma. Now, this whole thing is misunderstood by the scientists and the philosophers. Well, maybe there's some philosophers that understand it better than others, but still, uh, the fundamental question or the enigma that people are trying to figure out is how does life come into existence of living entities? Well, it's explaining it here today. Uh, First of all, it explains the why people misunderstand the original cause. It gives the example of the scorpion. The scorpion lays its eggs in piles of rice, and sometimes it is said that the scorpion is born out of rice, but the rice is not the cause of the scorpion. Actually, the eggs were laid by the mother. Similarly, material nature is not the cause of the birth of living entities. Okay, so that destroys Darwinism right there. Statement. The seed is basically Darwinism is all about at a certain point of material nature's, uh, combinations and different, let's say, uh, what's it called, combinations and uh,
Permutations.
yeah, permutations and combinations. Life comes from matter. Well, that's not a fact. Life comes from life. It doesn't come from matter. Okay, so the seed is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that's a very mysterious thing. How that happened, and they only seem to come out as products of material nature. Thus, every living entity, according to its past activities, has a different body created by this material nature, so that the entity can enjoy or suffer according to its past deeds. The Lord is the cause of all manifestations of living entities in this material world. Okay, so we are all coming from the Lord, but each individual living entity will determine his karma. And based on his actions and desires, he or she can get different bodies. So when we decide to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and act only uh, to serve the Lord with devotion and love, can we get out of this vicious cycle of birth, death, old age, disease? So it says, thus, every living entity, according to his past activities, has a different body created by the spiritual nature, so that the entity can enjoy or suffer according to his past deeds. The Lord is the cause of all manifestations of living entities in this material world. So unless we understand what is our actual position, our actual position is that we're being controlled by laws of material nature. And when we say laws of material nature, we're referring to God, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the controller of the laws of material nature. Of course, the scientists reject that concept, but the devotees understand it. Therefore, a devotee will not engage in sinful activities, knowing well that there are consequences for those type of activities. Even desiring sense gratification is the beginning of the what you would call karma of the material living being, a materialistic living being. When we purify our desires and we desire only to serve Krishna, then we begin to free ourselves from the control of material nature. How does material nature control us? By old age, disease, and death. Of course, living entity is eternal, but when we go through this process of birth, old age, disease, and death, it's a harrowing, or it's a very, let's say, stressful experience for a human being, because the desire of a human being is to live eternally. But the body, the material body of the human being, cannot be eternal. The soul, yes, is eternal. But the mistake everybody makes is to identify with the body. And because of that, the living entity is always in anxiety, not knowing what's going to happen next. Because at any point, one can die by accidents, by wars, and by very bad weather, and so forth. So the situation of the living entity in ignorance of Krishna is always precarious and full of anxiety. You should look, I mean, we've done this before, but why don't you look up how many people take medication for anxiety in the United States? I think, like, I think about what, 20% of Americans take drugs for anxiety. Anyway,
Yeah.
so the main statement here is the Lord is the cause of all manifestations of the living entities in this material world. So that debunks Darwinism right there, that statement.
In 2019, Maharaj, it is 3.4% of people take anxiety medicine.
3.4%. So that's a small percentage, right?
But in 2022, the most recent they have is about 10%.
Also increased.
Yeah.
From 2019,
2019 it said 3.2% of men and 3.4% of women take medicine. But in 2022, it says at least 10% of prescriptions filled in, it's all anxiety and depression medication.
10% of the population
Yeah.
take take medication to deal with their stress.
Yeah.
Right.
It also says some medication names: benzodiazepine.
Benzodiazepine. Yeah. What's it say? Yeah, those are types of medicines for stress.
Yeah, it says about 1 in 20 US adults ages 18 to 80 received benzodiazepine prescription. Women were about twice as likely as men to take benzodiazepine.
Read that last point again.
Women were about twice as likely as men to take benzodiazepine.
Yes. They have more stress than men do. Okay. So anyway, now we'll go to text 4. Sarvayoni Sukuntiya, Mutaya Sambhavantiya, Tasambrahma Mahadyonir, Ham Vichapadapita. It should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunt, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving father. Well, like I said, that just debunks Darwinism right there. In this verse, it is clearly explained, purport. In this verse, it is clearly explained that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the original father of all living entities. The living entities are combinations of the material nature and the spiritual nature. Such living entities are seen not only on this planet, but on every planet, even on the highest where Brahma is situated. Everywhere there are living entities. Within the earth, there are living entities, even within water and within fire. All these appearances are due to the mother material nature and Krishna's seed giving process. The purport is that the material world is impregnated with living entities who come out in various forms at the time of creation according to their past deeds. Well, that destroys Darwinism right there. And the idea is that all living entities appear at once. It's not that, the ant turns into a human being over, X number of years. All these species come into existence at one time. This is what's so shocking to people. And this is what's been explained by Prabhupada. And Sri Damodar Maharaj, he asked Prabhupada, is this a fact that everything comes into existence at once? And Prabhupada said, yes.
Oh.
All different species and everything. So, of course, living entities are put into different bodies according to their karma. But it's not let's say, a slow process. It's immediate. And this is what's perplexing to the scientists. And that's not the theory. I mean, if you read a book about how living entities come into existence, it happens over, millions of years of combinations and permutations of nature, of material elements, and eventually the living entity comes into existence. That's completely debunked here. Why? Because Krishna is the seed-giving father of all life. And that is what is perplexing to the scientists, because scientists have such inflated egos that they can't even imagine that there is a seed-giving father of all living entities. They come up with so many other theories, but they never accept the idea that there's one supreme personality of Godhead who is the father of all living entities. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, it is clearly explained that the supreme personality of Krishna is the original father of all living entities. There you go. That would be considered mythology by the modern scientists and so-called experts in how life came into existence. The living entities are combinations of the material nature and the spiritual nature. Such living entities are seen not only on this planet, but on every planet. And even on the highest, where Brahma is situated. Everywhere there are living entities. Within the earth, there are living entities, even within water and within fire. All these appearances are due to the mother material nature and Krishna's seed-giving process. You can write a whole book about Krishna's seed-giving process. The purport is that the material world is impregnated with living entities who come out in various forms at the time of creation according to their past deeds. Well, I mean, you can get a catalog of seed. Usually in the early springtime, people buy seeds. to plant. And there's all these different types of seeds you can get, cauliflower and zucchini and things like that, right? So it's a seed, and it develops into a plant that's usually edible. So where are these seeds coming from? Well, here it says, it should be understood that all species of life are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving Father. There it is. That's the explanation for where all the seeds are coming from. Of course, if you study, let's say, the origin of life, they don't talk about Krishna. They don't talk about the seed-giving Father. But in this purport, it says, in this verse, it is clearly explained that the Supreme Persona, Godhead Krishna, is the original Father of all living entities. The living entities are combinations of the material nature and the spiritual nature. Such living entities are seen not only on this planet, but on every planet. Okay, so now we have more information unknown by the scientists that there are living entities on every planet. It's not that, oh, the moon is a dusty place and there's no living entities on the moon. We haven't seen any. No, every planet, including the moon, there are living entities. Even on the highest, where Lord Brahma is situated. Everywhere there are living entities. Yeah, you can go to the bottom of the ocean. Sometimes it's like, I don't know, 10 miles deep in the ocean. And you'll find living entities. In fact, you'll find a lot of them where there's no sunlight and no heat, but yet they're living entities. Right? Usually you think, well, you have to have sunlight and heat to have living entities. No. On the most, let's say, deepest parts of, let's say, the North Pole or the South Pole, in the most terrible conditions, there are living entities. Right? And there's a lot, I mean, there's a lot of them, especially in the North Pole. And South Pole also, although you would think, no one could live, no living entity could live in these conditions. No, they are. They're everywhere. Okay. And there are living entities on every planet. It says such living entities are seen not only on this planet, but on every planet. Well, the scientists haven't figured that one out yet, that there are living entities on every planet, even on the highest where Brahma is situated. Everywhere there are living entities. Within the earth, there are living entities, even within water, and even within fire. Well, we haven't figured that one out either. The scientists haven't realized that there are living entities even in fire. All these appearances are due to the mother, material nature, and Krishna's seed-giving process. So that's the most important statement. Krishna is the seed-giving father of all living entities who come out in various forms at the time of creation according to their past deeds. So now we're getting the real story about nature and the gung-ho about the origin of things, because there's no way that they can experiment to figure out what is the origin of things. And they're not really so gung-ho about the finality of things. They're interested in the middle, how things are interacting. Right? They're not so interested in how it started or how it's ending. Why? Because they would have to admit that there is supernatural, let's say, there has to be a supernatural being that's that's organizing all this. I mean, you get the weather forecast. They're predicting what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen, next week, and so forth. So there's a certain predictability about nature. That means that someone is controlling it. Scientists are not controlling it. So, but to understand it, you simply have to uh, open up your eyes and see, the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of God, is controlling everything. And that is something that the material scientists would never accept. So they come up with their own theories. But that does not stop the predictability of nature, and it doesn't stop the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. The real purpose of science is to solve the enigmatic issue of birth, old age, disease, and death. They want to stop it. That's the real purpose of scientific, let's say, experimentation, is to find a way to make life uh, in the material body eternal. So you have all these different scientists trying to prolong the life of the human body, but it's a losing endeavor. The body is never going to be eternal. The soul is eternal, yes, but not the material body. So all that research that they're doing to crack the code of nature by which they can make the body immortal is a waste of time and money. But yet, there's huge amount of money being spent to find a way to either make life, make the living entity live longer, or eventually make the material body immortal. It's a waste of time and money. It'll never happen. But they have all these books and all these statements made by scientists that we're working very hard to make life longer, or eventually crack the let's say the problem of immortality. Okay, so we are not quite finished. All right. So now we'll go to this purport again. The impregnation of material nature is described in Bhagavad Gita, 14th chapter, verse 3. Material nature's primal factor is the Mahatattva, or breeding source of all varieties. This part of material nature, which is called pradhana, as well as Brahman. So the pradhana is the sum total of living entities before their appearance. So it's also called Brahman. It's impregnated by the Supreme Personality Godhead and delivers varieties of living entities. Material nature is, in this connection, is called Brahman because it is perverted. It is a perverted reflection of the spiritual nature. It is described in the Vishnu Purana that the living entities belong to the spiritual nature. The potency of the Supreme Lord is spiritual, and the living entities, although they are called marginal potency, are also spiritual. If the living entities were not spiritual, this description of impregnation by the Supreme Lord would not be applicable. The Supreme Lord does not put his semen into that which is not spiritual. But it is stated here that the Supreme Person puts his semen into material nature. This means that the living entities are spiritual by nature. After impregnation, material nature delivers all kinds of living entities, beginning from the greatest living creature, Lord Brahma, down to the insignificant ant, in all varieties of form. In Bhagavad Gita 14:4, material nature is clearly mentioned as Sarva Yonisu. This means that of all varieties of species, demigods, human beings, animals, birds, and beasts, whatever is manifested, material nature is the mother, and the Supreme Personality Godhead is the seed-giving father. So, if you want to grow something, you go and buy seeds, or you learn how to collect seed after harvest, or during the harvest period, you collect seeds of different plants and keep them until the next spring, where you're going to plant them. Right? So every plant has seeds, and so that is part of Krishna's, let's say, way of perpetuating material nature. It's by seeds. So the human body also has seeds called sperm. Those are seeds for producing living entities. How those seeds come about, it's not by anything that is, let's say, done by nature. Those seeds are impregnated into this, in other words, semen of the living entity. They're not produced by some material way. They're actually impregnated by the Lord. And the whole thing is happening in a mysterious way. We don't really understand how it happens. But the explanation is given in Srimad Bhagavatam, that the seeds of living entities are impregnated into the womb of the mother. So, is it by sex? No, actually, it's not by sex. It's mysteriously happened by Krishna, who injects the seeds of living entity in the womb of a mother. It's not by the, you would think, sperm of the father. Okay, so material nature's primal factor is the Mahat, or the breeding source of all varieties. This part of material nature, which is called Pradhana, as well as Brahman, is impregnated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and delivers varieties of living entities. Material nature in this connection is called Brahman because it is a perverted reflection of the spiritual nature. Okay, so there are obviously mysterious things happening that we don't understand. We have other explanations for what's happening, but the Bhagavatam gives the real explanation. It is described in the Vishnu Purana that the living entities belong to the spiritual nature. The potency of the Supreme Lord is spiritual, and the living entities, although they are called marginal potency, are also spiritual. If the living entities were not spiritual, this description of impregnation by the Supreme Lord would not be applicable. Very significant statement. Very, very important statement. In other words, if there was only matter and not spirit, then there would not be any living entities. It's only when material nature is impregnated with the seeds of the living entities, that living entities come into existence. It's not by any combination of matter. That's why it says here, the potency of the Supreme Lord is spiritual, and the living entities, although they are called marginal potency, are also spiritual. If the living entities were not spiritual, this description of impregnation would be applicable. So we don't read in any, book of mundane scientists about the impregnation of living entities into the material nature. The Supreme Lord does not put his semen into that which is not spiritual, but it is stated here that the Supreme Person puts his semen into material nature. This means that the living entities are spiritual by nature. After impregnation, material nature delivers all kinds of living entities, beginning from the greatest living creature, Lord Brahma, down to the insignificant ant. Okay, well, whenever you say material nature, you're speaking about Krishna, because he is the origin of everything. So it's not something different than Krishna. The material nature is completely under the control of Krishna. This is what the scientists don't know. In Bhagavad Gita 14.4, material nature is clearly mentioned as Sarvayonasu. This means that of all varieties of species, demigods, human beings, animals, birds, and beasts, whatever is manifested, material nature is the mother, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the seed-giving Father. So that is the most significant statement. Where do all these seeds come from? Without the seeds, nothing would grow. And there would not be any human beings also. So the seed-giving Father is Krishna. Without Krishna, nothing would grow. And he's the origin of everything. Generally, it is experienced that the father gives life to the child, but the mother gives its body. Although the seed of life is given by the father, the body develops within the womb of the mother. Similarly, the spiritual living entities are impregnated into the womb of material nature, but the body, being supplied by material nature, takes on many different species and forms of life. The theory that the symptoms of life are manifested by the interaction of the 24 material elements is not supported here. The living force comes directly from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and it's completely spiritual. Therefore, no material scientific advancement can produce life. Whoa, big statement here by Prabhupada. But the materialistic scientists are all trying to produce life from matter, and they're failing. The living force comes from the spiritual world, and it has nothing to do with the interaction of the material elements. So here we see that millions and millions of dollars and millions of hours are being wasted trying to create living entities from matter.
Yeah, in a lab, basically.
Yes. And it's not happening. They say, oh, it just happened, it only lasted for about 30 thousandth, 3,000th of a second, but we're getting close. Yeah, all lies. So this is a great purport. And it also refers to Bhagavad Gita 14.4, which said, it should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving father. So this has nothing to do with monkeys turning into human beings. Stupid philosophy of Darwin. And therefore, it should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving father. Well, right there, that debunks Darwinism and all the other speculative theories about the origin of human beings. In this verse, it is clearly explained that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the original father of all living entities. Hey, we're all related. That means the Muslims, the Christians, the Jews, the atheists, we're all related. Right? The living entities are combinations of the material nature and the spiritual. Such living entities are seen not only on this planet, but on every planet, even on the highest where Brahma is situated. Okay, so now we just learned something that the scientists are not cognizant of, that there are living entities on every planet of the universe. They haven't figured that one out. Everywhere there are living entities within the earth. There are living entities, even within water and within fire. So, when sometimes you light a match to purify a pin so that you can get rid of a splinter, right? But by putting the pin in fire, that's to purify it, right? It doesn't really purify it. Because the living entities their living entities don't die in fire; they live in fire. So the whole theory of the sterilization is debunked here. You know, uh, when they perform any type of surgery, they always have to sterilize everything. Because they're opening up the body, and so they have special gloves and special this and special that, and still people get die of infection. You know, that kills many people. Because as soon as they open the body is susceptible of becoming infected by all kinds of different, you could say, uh, invisible creatures. So they're very, very, very careful about opening up the body, and they have to sterilize everything so that there's no infection. But it's impossible, actually. Okay, so yeah, in previous times, uh, they had operations also, but they didn't understand clearly. Like let's say in uh, the previous times when there were war, they didn't really understand profoundly how there are microbial living beings that can, contaminate a person, and then you die because there are all kinds of different insects and bacteria and so forth. So it wasn't understood. Once the microscope was invented, then they took more cognizance of an entire microbial universe that they didn't know existed. They got shocked, when they used the microscope and they saw all these living entities that are microbial. But definitely they're living entities, and they can kill you also. So then, therefore, they had to come up with different ways of sterilizing things. So earlier on, so you go back to the 100 years, 200 years, and use whiskey as a purifier, right? Because it's alcohol. And it does kill some germs. It doesn't kill all germs, it does kill some germs. So, and now they've come up with all kinds of chemicals to, let's say, sterilize things because they know that there are microscopic beings that can contaminate a person and kill them. Okay. Check.
Yes.
Are there any questions? So let me just read the verse again. After the Supreme Personality of Godhead impregnates material nature with his internal potency, material nature delivers the sum total of the cosmic intelligence, which is known as Hiranmaya. Okay, now when you talk about Hiranmaya, which is referred to as the cosmic intelligence, this is talking about Krishna, and about the origin of species. This takes place in material nature when she is agitated by the destinations of the conditioned souls. So every living entity has karma, and that karma needs to be, let's say, lived. So therefore, that's when it says this takes place in material nature when she is agitated by the destination of the conditioned souls. So then in the purport, it talks about the impregnation of material nature is described in Bhagavad Gita 14th chapter, verse 3. Material nature's primal factor is the Mahat Tattva, or the breeding source of all varieties. This part of material nature, which is called Pradhana, as well as Brahman, is impregnated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and delivers all varieties of living entities. So, and let's say there's pralaya, there's destruction of material nature, but then there's going to be a new, let's say, series of living entities coming into nature. And nature, let's say there's a big fire and all the trees are burned, but yet there will be seeds that are not burned, and then new plants will be born, and then eventually the forest will grow again. So the same way, nature is, let's say, self. It rejuvenates itself, and therefore it's not really a catastrophe when there's a fire and it burns thousands of trees. It's just rejuvenating itself because all those trees are going to come back again. And therefore, even with human beings, it says here, material nature's primal factor is the Mahatattva, or breeding source of all varieties. This part of material nature, which is called Pradhana, as well as Brahman, is impregnated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and delivers varieties of living entities. Material nature, in this connection, is called Brahman because it is a perverted reflection of the spiritual nature. So the mysterious thing that's happening is this impregnation of the living entities into the material nature. That is the origin of the living entities. It's all coming from Krishna. Do the scientists have a different explanation? Maybe, but mostly not. So if they don't have a tangible explanation, then they have to then they have to accept what the Shastra is saying. Okay, so are there any questions?
And this fact is not known. The whole entire civilization is misguided because we're so it's a painful thing to realize that nobody is who's leading this world. I mean, we're talking about the leaders, the scientists, everybody. Everybody is misguided because nobody knows the. Very few people know because very few people have access to this true knowledge.
So here's our takeaway today. Generally, it is experience. Gives life to the child, but the mother gives its body. Although the seed of life is given by the father, the body develops within the womb of the mother. Similarly, the spiritual living entities are impregnated into the womb of material nature, but the body, being supplied by material nature, takes on many different species and forms of life. The theory that the symptoms of life are manifest by the interaction of the 24 material elements is not supported theory. Living force comes directly from the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is completely spiritual. Therefore, no material scientific advancement can produce life. That's a major statement. I wish we should write a letter and send it to the United States government so they don't waste any money on researching, Therefore, no material scientific advancement can produce life. The living force comes from the spiritual world and has nothing to do with the interactions of the material elements. There it is. Therefore, there is no possibility that the scientists are going to create a living entity in a test tube. They claim they can do things like that, but it's all just false junk science. And everything begins microscopically. And actually, it's submicroscopically, actually. Everything is happening in a very mysterious way. And there's unseen sources of things that are impossible to be experimented. Science has to experiment, see things. But the origins of life are not, let's say, seeable. Therefore, we have to accept the explanations in the Shastra. Otherwise, we're just going to speculate, make speculations about the origin of things, and it's not going to work. Okay.
Any other questions and thoughts from my mind?
Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Chant Hare Krishna and be happy.